Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Erin Viner.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, outrage and grief continue in Israel's capital city over the wave of Arab violence that included the terror attack that killed an American baby and a woman from Ecuador. 3-month-old Chaya Zissel Brown died almost immediately after a Palestinian terrorist rammed his car into an unsuspecting crowd of civilians waiting for the light rail train in an attack that also injured 8 others. 22-year-old Karen Mosquera was critically wounded and later succumbed to her injuries at a Jerusalem hospital. The 21-year-old assailant, Abdul Rahman al-Shaludi, was a resident of East Jerusalem, the neighborhood of Silwan, where he was a known felon who had served time in prison for other acts of terror, including the throwing of firebombs at police and Jewish residents of Jerusalem, attempted arson, aggravated assault, and rioting. He was also the nephew of senior Hamas terrorist Moe Yadin Sharif, a master bomb maker who was killed in 1988. Al-Shaludi was shot by security services as he attempted to flee the scene. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accusing Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of responsibility for actively creating an atmosphere of incitement, pointing out that Abbas called for the harming of Jewish Israelis just days before that attack.
There was near-deafening silence in the world media over the terror attack in Jerusalem, and what coverage there was appeared to be heavily biased against Israel. Almost unbelievably, the Associated Press reported the story with the misleading headline, "Israeli police shoot man in East Jerusalem." After wide-ranging protests on social media sites against the shocking text, AP then changed the headline to read, "Car slams into East Jerusalem train station." Following further outrage from the public, the news service subsequently amended it further to say Palestinian kills baby at Jerusalem station. But they noted that the murder and wounding of innocent civilians was the result of what police called a terror attack. The Associated Press frequently faces charges that it is guilty of promoting a pro-Arab bias.
Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh praised the Jerusalem terrorist as a martyr, as other senior spokesmen for the Gaza-based terror group honored the perpetrator for his so-called acts of heroism. Posters portraying al-Shaludi's virtue were widely circulated on social media sites affiliated with Hamas. Both Hamas, which is a partner in the Palestinian government with Abbas' Fatah faction, and the Islamic Jihad terror organization, used the attack to call for a third intifada against the Jewish residents of Israel's capital city.
Critics are slamming the U.S. State Department for equating the American victim of a terror attack with an American terrorist killed in a defensive action. As Arab riots continue to rage throughout Israel, a 17-year-old Palestinian American was shot and killed near the village of Silwad near Ramallah. Israeli security services say that they prevented a major terrorist attack after they returned fire at Orwa Hamed, who was throwing firebombs on the highway near the Benjamin community of Ofra. Immediately after the incident, the U.S. State Department demanded a speedy and transparent investigation into the circumstances of Hamed's death. It also sent the U.S.'s deepest condolences to Hamed's family, just as it had days before to the family of the murdered American baby. The State Department did not, however, call for an investigation into the death of 3-month-old Chaya Zissel Brown, and when directly asked if Washington considered Hamed firebombing Israeli vehicles to be an act of terrorism, State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki clearly responded, "It is not."
Egypt is blaming Hamas for the cross-border aiding and abetting of terrorists in the Sinai. following the recent spike of Islamist terror attacks in the peninsula that killed at least 30 Egyptian soldiers and wounded 25 others. Senior diplomats in Cairo announced that the indirect ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas officials will not be resumed in Cairo as slated this week. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is now reportedly considering the creation of a security corridor a few kilometers wide along its entire border with Gaza that would involve the demolition of homes and other structures to ensure the complete destruction of any remaining tunnels from Gaza into the Sinai. Earlier, Egypt also sealed the Rafah border crossing and declared a 3-month state of emergency in parts of northern Sinai where the latest round of violence erupted. During an address to his nation, Sisi declared that the Islamist terrorists were foreign-funded and that the attacks were carried out in attempts to demoralize Egyptians. The Interior Minister went even further, saying that there is evidence that Palestinians have been involved in the recent spate of terror attacks against Egyptians by training the insurgents and supplying them with weapons.
Both Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. Congress are warning that the greatest threats to U.S. national security are now posed by lone terrorists following 3 attacks in North America. New York's Commissioner of Police William Bratton said there is no question that the hatchet assault on 4 law enforcement officers in New York was a terrorist attack. 32-year-old Zale Thompson was shot dead by police during the attack on a street in the borough of Queens. The suspect is described as being a self-radicalized African-American convert to Islam with an online history of jihadi activity. Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper has promised to redouble his nation's anti-terror efforts following 2 separate attacks by lone wolf Islamic killers. Michael Zahaf Bibu was shot dead inside the House of Commons by the Sergeant at Arms after going on a shooting rampage at a war memorial where he gunned down an honor guard at point-blank range. The perpetrator was described as a 32-year-old petty criminal who recently converted to Islam. Just 1 day before, a Quebec driver described by police as a radicalized supporter of the Islamic State was fatally shot after he hit 2 soldiers, killing 1.
A Karachi court has released Kari Hashim, who was charged with involvement in the murder of American Jewish journalist Daniel Pearl. Judge Abdul Ghafoor said that the acquittal came due to a lack of credible evidence. Hashim was arrested in 2005 for allegedly introducing Pearl to British-born Islamic radical Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, who was convicted of the brutal killing and sentenced to death by a Pakistani anti-terror court. Pearl was the South Asia bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal and was abducted January 23, 2002, while researching a story about Islamist militants. A graphic video of his beheading was delivered to the U.S. consulate in Karachi 1 month later. 3 other co-defendants received life terms in prison. All of the convicted terrorists are appealing their verdicts, and the cases are still pending.
An Israeli company called SoulLogic has unveiled its latest invention, a remarkable tree capable of utilizing energy from the sun around the clock to provide power for electrical outlets. The e-tree powers smartphone and tablet chargers and also provides free Wi-Fi service. This innovative blend of technology and nature can create shade from its umbrella of 7 solar panels that generate 7 kilowatts a day. It operates automatically with minimal maintenance. Other features include a drinking fountain and even a computer monitor so users can communicate with friends sitting under other e-trees. Night lights are an added bonus, making the invention not just decorative but helpful. The chairman of the Benjamina-based company, Michael Lastry, says he is particularly proud that the e-tree is green in all senses of the word, meeting all safety standards, posing no risks of electrocution or radiation. Artist Yoav Ben Dov designed the attractive and functional creation that is ideal for courtyards, residential neighborhoods, educational facilities, and even hiking trails, and that it will be particularly valued by young people who always seem to have an electronic device that requires charging. SoulLogic is now in negotiations to install e-trees in France and China.
More than 1 million Jewish children have been killed by abortion in Israel since 1948. Israel is currently engaged in a demographic war for its very survival as a Jewish state. Imagine what a difference 1 million more Jews would have made for Israel. Friends of Efrat saves the lives of thousands of children every year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Since 1977, Efrat has saved over 30,000 lives and is recognized as a world leader in preventing abortions. You can play a major role in Israel's survival now by helping us save Israel's unborn children.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on our beautiful rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Pastor Jim Garlow of Skyland Church. Pastor Garlow, thank you for being on the show.
Good being with you.
Pastor Garlow, tell us a little about why you chose to come to Israel.
Well, we love Israel, first of all. We love this land. After all, this is God's land, so if God loves it, we ought to as well. A year and a half ago, experienced a tragedy and loss of my wife of 42 years, and after going through that healing time, finally had the privilege of remarrying, and so I'm a newlywed, and I married a woman whose name was Schindler, as in Oscar Schindler, Schindler's List, and she'd been here 52 times. So I already had deep love for Israel from my family, my parents. When my father came here, probably in his 70s, the only time he was able to make it from the Midwest of the United States, he made the statement as soon as he got here, "I am at home now." And so that was bred into me as a Christian evangelical, that we love Israel, care deeply about the Jewish people, and honor them. And I married a woman who likewise carries that tradition. So it's a real joy to be here.
Well, we're about to head into the midterm elections this week, and you're very involved in getting people to vote. Why is it so important that people vote in the midterm elections?
Well, first of all, we do live in a democracy, and it says in the scripture that the government is to be the minister of God, the diakonos of God in the New Testament. Well, if that's the case, and you're in a representative form of government, a democracy, then the people help shape the government. And we want the government to do what's right under God. So consequently, it's the task, it's the obligation of a follower of Yeshua, I believe, that they actually vote and participate in the political process and stay informed and understanding who represents them. So we encourage pastors, first of all, once a year to preach what we call a biblical election sermon. It's at a site called pulpitfreedom.org, and we try to get pastors across America to stand up and educate their congregations why they should be highly informed in political life, and why they should be participating, and why they should vote, particularly as critical as the issues are right now.
You're involved in something called Project 75, working to get Bible-believing Christians back into the election process. Tell us a little bit about that.
Project 75 is project75.org is a movement to attempt to get pastors to get at least a minimum of 75% of their congregants registered and voting. And they can do it all kinds of ways. We have very sophisticated ways to help them with a lot of technology, or they can simply do it by exhorting and encouraging people from the pulpit to get registered and to vote. What's critical in this year's election, for example, is the U.S. Senate is hanging in the balance. We have either conservative values or we have very left-wing values. And I care about biblical values, which tend to be conservative values. And there's about 14, maybe as many as 15 key swing states that will determine the future of America in whom they elect for senators. And so our dream is, as part of Project 75, we've identified at least 733,000 conservative Protestant evangelicals who did not vote in the midterms 4 years ago. And we're trying to reach for a goal of getting 469,000 of them from these 14 or 15 key swing states to vote, and it can affect America enormously, but also could have impact on Israel in terms of America's standing with Israel, which we feel very strongly about.
Yeah, President Obama won the last election, it said, because evangelical Christians just didn't turn out to vote. Why did so many evangelical Christians stay home?
There's many who have the misguided notion that all politics is dirty. Well, it's dirty because clean people left, and only half the people who are evangelicals registered, and only half of them voted. They have a little bit of an escapist mentality. Hey, God's going to just turn out okay, I don't have to do anything. So that's really a naive notion. We're to go into all the world. And my scripture doesn't say in the New Testament go into all the world except politics, or accept education, or accept the media, or accept all these other things. Go into all the world and be an influence for God in all these arenas. And so we're trying to help evangelical Christians understand the commitment to that. The good news is many of them do. The good news is there tends to be, I think, a rising awareness of how crisis this moment is in American history. So I hope we're correcting it. I believe we'll find out very soon if that is, because there's a sense of deep crisis across America today. We are in a moral and an economic freefall as a nation right now.
We're feeling here in Israel unprecedented pressure from Secretary of State Kerry and the Obama administration. Kerry went as far to say the controversial statement that the crisis in Israel is fueling ISIS, a radical Islamic, scary terrorist organization. How important are these midterm elections in the relationship between America and Israel?
Well, first of all, I want to say to any people in Israel who are watching me now, I apologize on behalf of what our President and our Secretary of State do and say as it relates to Israel. I am embarrassed. All decent people that I know of, that I run with, are horribly embarrassed by the treatment of Israel. We apologize to you. It's important we get these kind of people removed from office as soon as possible, and the election offers us a chance to at least try to put some restraints on this president for the next 2 years. I flew over here during the midst of the time that when Hamas was firing all those rockets at you from Gaza, and I came with 51 pastors. There were one pastor from each state, and then there was one pastor from the District of Columbia. So 51 of us came over as a part of a solidarity tour. We were taken right down to Sderot. We were taken to the Iron Dome base, and we got to meet with a number of your military and political leaders during that time. And we came during that time just to say we stand with you. We stand in solidarity. I would contend that the majority of Americans still know the truth about Israel, that the majority of Americans still know that Israel is the best friend we've got in the world. In fact, in my contention, your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is the world's leader when it comes to freedom. We used to have presidents who could stand like that. We don't right now, and we're embarrassed, and we feel badly about that. But I would contend the majority of Americans realize what's at stake. They realize what Hezbollah, what Hamas, they realize ISIS, they get it on how horrible this is, and what you face here, what you face from Iran with the potential of nuclear devastation. And we stand with you, and I believe the way that Israel has conducted themselves in these horrific conditions you find yourself in is so admirable and awesome. And I can't give you the scientific data right now, but I would contend that the most of Americans do not stand with our president when he treats you the way, and our Secretary of State when he says the kind of things that he does. That does not represent the people of America.
We see, though, in the Senate and the House, both Democrats and Republicans stand very firmly with Israel. Why do you think it's a bipartisan issue?
Well, I think that's a good point. I was just recently back in Washington, D.C. with CUFI, Christians United for Israel, and there were many, both Republicans and Democrats, who get the issue. There's many Democrats who are embarrassed by the president who's a part of their own party. They get it, bipartisan, because it's truth. How could you possibly stand with the various dictators and the brutal dictatorships that are surrounding you? How could you possibly stand with Islamic State or various Islamic cultures that rob all the freedoms, the fundamental freedoms that we so value as Americans and Israeli? So in that sense, that is encouraging. It is bipartisan. I wish I could say that every Democrat stands with you the way I wish every single Republican did. Overwhelmingly, most Republicans do stand with you, and increasing numbers of Democrats do. So I think that's a very encouraging sign on our side of the water.
Pastor Garlow, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Stand firm. Stand firm. God made very clear in the Scriptures how He views Israel and the Jewish people. I'm not a Jew, and I'm not from Israel, but I get it. God does not back up on His word. And He has declared with crystal clarity. Some of us feel it stronger than many of you perhaps even watching this, that God stands with you, and He will not vacate this nation. He will not forsake this nation. He will not abandon this nation and these people. And as long as people like me have breath, we will not as well. We stand with you. We deeply love Israel and the Jewish people.
Thank you, Pastor Garlow, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
It is heartbreaking to learn that there are over 40,000 abortions in Israel every year, many of which are due to financial concerns. The Efrat organization saves the lives of thousands of Jewish children each year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Please help us save thousands more.
This is Jerusalem, Israel's capital city. It's an ancient and modern treasure that is beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
Every time I've been to Israel, I would say that every time I go to Jerusalem, to see all the artifacts that are still there, all the stones, they've been there for thousands of years, to see that they're still standing is really cool. And for this trip in particular, I would say that the whole team atmosphere representing our country playing the Maccabi games is a great feeling. So
it's a beautiful country. Everything we've seen so far has been amazing, and I definitely want to come back. I mean, it's an experience unlike any other. It just, I feel at home here just because it's Israel.
I feel like it's a great opportunity to compete against the best Jewish athletes in the world. It brings out the best in all of us.
Well, I think I want to go home and share my experiences with others, so I think that's really what all my experiences are going to lead up to, sharing them.
It brings everyone together. It's everyone's homeland here. So.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation by a lake. But this is the Sea of Galilee. The wonders of Israel are beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
When Israel was established in 1948, it was exactly as the prophet Ezekiel foresaw. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will cause you to come up from your graves, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. Israel literally arose from the ashes of the Holocaust, one of the greatest miracles in human history. Still today there are some 200,000 Holocaust survivors which still live in Israel. According to the Israeli government, there are still 1/3 of them who are in need and live below the poverty line. Over the past 3 years, the Lord placed a unique opportunity before the International Christian Embassy to help those heroes who survived the darkest chapter of Jewish history.
In December 2009, the Aid Department of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, ICEJ Aid, was approached by Shimon Sabag, the director of the social welfare organization Yad Ezer Lehaver, who was looking for support for a special project. Having been shocked to see Holocaust survivors coming to his soup kitchen for food, he realized that there was a distinct need and began a project to house 14 survivors in the building next door to the offices of the organization.
When we were actually approached by the organization Yad Ezer Lehaver in Haifa, for Holocaust survivors, we somehow knew when we visited the project and visited the director that we had stumbled on something very unique. The project was very unique, there's nothing like it in the land, and also the organization itself had a proven track record. And we just knew that we had to start working with them.
Thanks to the generous giving of faithful Christian supporters worldwide, the ICEJ has assisted Yad Ezer Lehaver in achieving what was once just a dream, a neighborhood of multi-dwelling facilities able to provide practical care and a comfortable and safe home for more than 100 Holocaust survivors.
When we actually first met him, Shimon had a great heart and lots of dreams, but his vision for this place was at the most to maybe house 20 people. And we started on this together, not knowing what would happen, and seeing in the end this amazing street full of buildings.
The Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors has captured the attention of the Israeli press and a number of Israeli leaders and dignitaries. At ceremonies marking the stages of completion, the attendance of senior government officials and leaders has given voice to the need to assist these individuals who have suffered so much. In the past year, the Haifa Home dedicated a synagogue on its premises to provide a place for the survivors to participate in Shabbat services and observe Jewish holidays. The synagogue also provided the opportunity for some of the survivors to have their bar mitzvahs, since many of them were denied this rite of passage due to being interned in concentration camps.
The Holocaust survivors are very old. They are from their end 70s into their 90s, and are quite a lot of them who are poor, they cannot live by themselves anymore, and who are lonely. And that's actually why it was so necessary to have a home for them, where they could feel cared for and they would be able to live their life in security and in a good atmosphere.
I didn't expect in my life that I'm going to end up here. Quiet, the price is right, I don't have to pay too much. And I'm so grateful to the International Christian Embassy. After all what we went through, they built for us a home where I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. I'm going to die here. And I'm grateful to all the people in the world who are helping us.
Please prayerfully consider what you can do in order to stand with us to help those last surviving heroes here in Israel.
And that's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Erin Viner.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.